The House version of the Farm Bill is moving through its process, and many are wondering about the status of the Senate's version of the bill. We'll get an update this morning. And we will talk ethanol to jet. How cluttered is the path for corn-based ethanol? Finally, we'll wrap up today with a conversation about how to be mindful of pollinators during the planting season.
Live from a partly fine day via Farm Journal broadcast, this is AgriTalk. This morning we'll begin with a conversation with Senator Chuck Grassley. Then it's Kurt Ailes from FBN, and later Allison Walston from Valent for Growing Matters and Be Sure. Directly following the news, Karen Bonert from Farm Journal's Milk. I'm handsome newsman Davis Michelson. Now here's the host of AgriTalk, Chip Lowry.
All right, Davis. Hey, thank you so much. It's a beautiful 61 degrees in northeast Iowa.
Uh-huh.
We are headed for a high of 70 degrees.
Okay.
The clouds are moving out. The sun is clearing, but it does have that filtered effect.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Canadian smoke again, dude.
What?
Yeah.
No. Really?
Yes.
I make
I'm
the
not
news.
kidding.
I didn't say anything about Canadian wildfires. I don't think.
No, they're happening. If they're not in Davis's news, they can't actually be happening.
I wouldn't think
so.
so.
I'm hearing?
That's exactly it.
I would tend to agree with that. and these are way up there in BC, in British Columbia, as I understand.
Well, and I don't mean to make light of a freaking wildfire. Geez, especially if it's clouding your skies there in Iowa.
Right. It's happening again. We're getting the haze effect over the Midwest, at least in parts of the Midwest, from the smoke from the wildfires up north.
Well, if that haze turns purple at any point, just let me take the show. Well, you go ahead and relax, okay?
Yeah, then it becomes a real event.
A little different deal.
That's right. Welcome to AgriTalk. I'm Chip. That is Davis. The good Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa will be joining us today. Couple of issues that we need to talk about. We have not gotten his reaction to the GREET model update and whether or not there could be some adjustments later.
I bet I could ballpark his opinion of it.
Probably, yes. We will also talk about the Farm Bill. And then we've got some other issues coming in. We're going to talk more about the biofuels and the GREET model and the 45Z credits, how you might want to start to think about preparing for that if you are so inclined.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
All right.
I love it.
Let's get to the news.
We'll start with the weather. The National Weather Service is looking for severe thunderstorms and excessive rainfall to continue for portions of the southeast today. Furthermore, new daily record high temperatures are expected for portions of South Florida and southern Texas for the next few days. The rainfall potential increases later this week for East Texas and most of Louisiana, with additional flooding possible. Chip, private exporters reported sales of 405,000 metric tons of corn for delivery to Mexico. Leaning more toward the 24-25 marketing year, but split between the current and the upcoming marketing year, Chip.
Yeah, there's Mexico again. If it wasn't for Mexico, our corn business would be really, really slow, but it's not because we've got Mexico.
I've got some crop progress report highlights here. This the crop progress and condition update as of May 12. Winter wheat, 50% good to excellent, unchanged from last week, 57% headed well above the 5-year average. Corn is 49% planted, fell behind the average pace, which stands at 54%, but now 23% emerged compares to 21% on average. Soybeans, 35% planted, just 1 point ahead of average, 16% emerged. They're in good shape there on emergence. Spring wheat, 61% planted. That's way ahead of 48% on average, 25% emerged. Cotton, 33% planted, ahead of the 31% average. Any thoughts there?
If there's any concern there that's developing, it would be on the corn planting side. Yep. Yeah, we're 5 points behind the 5-year average. So, and we're probably not going to be making up any time this week.
No. South American crop consultant Dr. Michael Cordonnier cut his RG soybean crop estimate 1 million metric tons to 50 million metric tons due to some disappointing yields and the potential for frost. After the recent string of cuts to the RG corn crop, thanks to losses from corn stunt disease, Cordonnier left his corn crop estimate at 47 million metric tons with a neutral to lower bias toward both crops in Argentina. The Wheat Quality Council's annual HRW tour through Kansas and remote areas of surrounding states kicks off this morning in Manhattan, Kansas. For those of you out east, it's Manhattan, Kansas.
Yeah, tour time. That's time. Right. Yep, and ground truthing the potential of the crop out there. Looking forward to the reports.
The Biden administration announced a significant increase in tariffs on Chinese imports, including electric vehicles, batteries, and semiconductors, as part of efforts to protect American jobs ahead of the November 5 election. The new measures will double the tariff rate on Chinese semiconductors by 2025, quadruple the rate on EVs to 100%, and triple tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. And I get this, Chip. Donald Trump moved to one-up his rival, saying, quote, "I will put a 200% tax on every car that comes in from those plants." He said that at a rally in New Jersey Saturday, referring to Chinese vehicles manufactured in Mexico. That New Jersey rally was quite the deal. 200% on every car that comes in, huh?
Oh, boy.
What are we doing?
Well, but he's not going to have to do that because he's also said that he will reverse the mandate or the rules and regs that point to a mandate to EVs. So he's talking about putting tariffs on something that isn't going to be mandated. I don't know.
Well, ocean-going transits at the Panama Canal reached a 7-month high in April with 789 vessels. That's an increase of 42 vessels from March, but 289 fewer from April 2023. This, according to the Panama Canal Authority. Nice, they finally got that broken loose, Chip.
All right, that's good. Thank you, Davis. Let's bring in Karen Boner to Farm Journal's Milk. Good morning, Karen.
Hello, Chip.
So everything is bigger in Texas, including the dairies, huh?
Oh, yes. They say that 70% of the cows in the United States live on 5% of the dairies. And that's a big statistic, right? And I think that statistic, Chip, will grow. And I would say that it certainly holds true in states like Texas. The upcoming processing regulations are less strict. And in the Panhandle, Chip, the average size of dairy is probably around 4,000 plus cows.
Wow. So how is that all changing the flow of supply around the country? Is it all regionalized yet?
Not yet. I would say that as far as where the milk's going to come in for these processing, I don't know if Texas will be able to supply it all. Some of it will come in from East New Mexico and Southwest Kansas. But, I think this is an ongoing conversation as, we got to look at the processing, not just in states like Texas, but I would say, again, especially Texas. And, think strategically where the milk is actually going. I think at some point, some of these processing plants, the smaller ones, the inefficient ones, will close down at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Is this primarily a labor issue? Is that what we're talking about?
I wouldn't say it's a labor issue. It's just, a lot of transportation, and we can't, transportation is not cheap. So we got to think strategically. When I was in Texas earlier this year, those guys are paying a lot of money to move milk.
Yeah. Okay. Karen, good story. Make sure that you read it. Head over to www.dairyherd.com. All right, Karen, thanks. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.
You bet. Karen Bonert, editor of Farm Journal's Milk. Okay, coming up next, conversation about biofuels, the Farm Bill. Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa. Up next on AgriTalk.
The truth is hard to come by these days, unless you listen to AgriTalk.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm your host, Chip Flory. Glad that you are with us on this Tuesday morning. Joining us now, U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa. Senator, welcome back to AgriTalk. It's great to talk with you again.
Always glad to visit about Iowa's number one industry, agriculture, and 86,000 family farmers.
You bet. Glad that you are here to do it. And speaking of that, you are one of the family farmers included in that 86,000. So let's get the first crop report of the year. How's the planting season going?
Well, it started out very, very good. About 10 days early, April the 12th, 160 acres. The next Monday, up to 340 acres. And then probably a week without planting anything. And then the next round finished all but 200 acres of corn, and that may be done yesterday. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
And beans were finished 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Wow. It's coming right along, isn't it? It's fun when we can get an early start and get things in the ground and get them up and growing. So good stuff. Good stuff. We'll be looking forward to those crop reports through the year here, Senator. Let's jump over to the tariffs that were announced this morning by the Biden administration on goods from China, including tariffs on electric vehicles. What do you make of the strategy what do you make of this strategy?
I'm a free trader. I'm a free trader because Iowa manufactures and does services and does agriculture way beyond what we consume domestically, and we must be exporting. And I think that this is going to invite retaliation by China, and that possible retaliation could be agriculture. And remember, about a third of our agriculture production is exported. So that sort of retaliation could be hard. I think the Chinese would be smart enough to know that hurting agriculture would be a big backlash to Biden here in the United States when the farmers started complaining about it.
Yeah. Senator, it almost feels like there has been a rolling retaliation by China already in place for some of the relations, the freezing of relations between the U.S. and China, because China seems to have backed away from the U.S. market for soybeans, for corn, for other ag commodities, for pork. Do you think that's by design, or is that by just simply the fundamentals of the market?
Well, I don't know the prices of Brazil soybeans compared to U.S. soybeans and what that does to a Chinese decision. But we shouldn't be surprised that there's this sort of retaliation because it happened this is potential retaliation. We don't know for sure. But it was real retaliation in the case of Trump putting on tariffs on China. Yeah. And China invites some of this themselves because they're emphasizing overproduction in manufacturing, and that's a subsidized overproduction, and then exporting it onto the world market. They aren't following the rules of international trade the way they should. But it's kind of like Smoot-Hawley, the 1930 tariffs. The United States led the way in putting on high tariffs. The rest of the world put on high tariffs. You shut down international trade. International trade shut down. It brings economic problems around the world. And as a result of those economic problems, Germany starts invading other countries. And before it's all done, 15 years after Smoot-Hawley, you have 60 million people killed. And so what this is going to lead to, I hope it's nothing like that, but we should learn a lesson that the United States thought that they could tariff its way out of its economic problems, and it created more problems. And then we learn a lesson, and we have reciprocity rules that if you reduce your tariffs, we'll reduce ours. Then we set up the GATT organization before the World Trade Organization. We had about 60 years of less trade wars through tariffs, and we saw the world poverty rate go down from 50% down to about 8%. Yep. And that free trade and capitalism has elevated the lives of a lot of people around the world.
Yes. Boy, I'm glad you brought that history lesson to us, Senator. That is really important perspective for us to all understand how this is going, because Now I've got to. I haven't brought up former President Trump in our conversations much, if at all, but I feel like I need to now because Trump's reaction to this is to one up Biden this morning by saying that he will be even more aggressive with tariffs on China and more aggressive on imports in general. Is that's obviously concerning to you?
Well, it's a point I brought up, and I'd be repeating what I just said about Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. But sometime in the 4 years of the Trump administration, I brought this up in the Oval Office, and he had two of his economists there with him. And I said, your two economists aren't serving you well if they're backing up these high tariffs you want to do. And obviously, I don't know what sort of an impact it made, but he still ended up with his tariffs. But I wanted to educate him about the history of high tariffs and the negative impact it has.
Right. Okay. We have not had an opportunity to speak since the Treasury Department delivered its final decision on the GREET model and how it helps to define the pathway for corn-based ethanol into the sustainable aviation fuel market. What's your reaction? It seems that number one, there's a lot of boxes to check on the production side to make the corn eligible for this market.
Well, there's several angles to hit your question at. Yeah. Number one, I'm going to start with it's promoting more exports, potential exports of Brazilian ethanol made from sugar into the United States. There's one refinery in the United States that's set up to make this fuel. It's in Georgia. Mm-hmm. So they're importing from Brazil ethanol. Ethanol is the basis for this next step of aviation fuel. And then, so it seems to me they're promoting Brazilian agriculture ahead of American agriculture.
Yeah.
And then there's the issue of these bureaucrats in Washington really don't understand the way we commingle grain in Iowa from 86,000 family farmers. And so you want to produce this corn under these rules, which are very difficult to meet. But if you wanted to do it, you'd have to keep your grain separate. Well, our ethanol plants aren't set up to have a separate refining of corn for production of aviation fuel compared to all the other fuel they make. Right. And the farmers can't commingle it, or they wouldn't get credit for it.
Right.
So it's just a bad situation. In other words, let me end it this way: we got a bunch of bureaucrats in Washington D.C. that don't know anything about how we handle our agricultural products in Iowa, and they write these regulations that nobody's going to be able to make use of.
Right. Exactly. I've only got about 30 seconds on this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. The 45Z tax credits for SAF production, January 1, 2025, expire at the end of 2027. Is it too early to start talking about extending those tax credits to give SAF producers certainty going forward?
It'd be easier to talk about on November 6th. If Biden's reelected, he said he's going to let it sunset. If Trump's reelected, he's going to ask for it to be renewed. And I'm in favor of renewing it. But we're going to have a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and a Republican House to get the job done.
Gotcha, Senator. Thank you so much for your time. We certainly appreciate it. Be safe.
Goodbye.
All right, that is U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa. Coming up next, we're going to talk more about the 45Z credits and If you are so inclined, what should you do to get ready for it?
Time for Markets Now with the experts from Pro Farmer.
Joining us now, Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady. Bit of a change from yesterday, Brian, and quite a bit of pressure on the grain markets today.
Yeah, so we've had really strong run-ups here recently, especially in the wheat market, and that's the market that's facing the most price pressure here at mid-morning, Chip. Double-digit losses across the winter wheat markets are leading us to the downside, about 15 to 17 cents lower or so. Spring wheat futures 10 to 12 cents lower, but nothing more than a corrected pullback at this point in time off those really strong gains that we've seen here recently, like I mentioned. That's having an influence on both the corn and soybean markets, anywhere upwards of a nickel lower in both of those markets in the front end at least. And soybeans in particular, we're seeing a lot of spreading action in the soy complex. So soy oil's under heavy pressure, and the meal market's trading pretty solidly to the upside. So soybeans are kind of caught in the middle, but definitely favoring the downside here.
Yeah, rumors must be changing in that soybean oil market to get that much heavy selling into that market here this morning, huh?
Yeah, I don't think the used cooking oil is included in the Chinese tariff stuff that
Right.
the Biden administration announced earlier this morning.
That is something that you and I can talk more about this afternoon when you are back on AgriTalk. Great gains in the cattle complex.
Yeah, so it wasn't a very good finish yesterday. We had gains, when we talked in mid-morning yesterday, and pretty solid gains at both live cattle and feeders, and just didn't finish very well. But they're trying again here at mid-morning today with strong gains in both of those markets. Same kind of thing happened in hogs yesterday, just not a real good finish, and they're trading to the upside as well.
Good stuff. We'll talk to you this afternoon. Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady.
Opinions expressed on AgriTalk do not necessarily reflect the views of Farm Journal Broadcasting, affiliate stations, or sponsors. Do you suffer from talking on the radio phobia? No problem. Send us a tweet at #AgriTalk.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm Chip Flory. Glad you're with us. Really interesting answer to the question about, is it too early to start talking about an extension of the 45Z tax credits, even though they're not even in place yet? They don't start until January 1, 2025. But those are the tax credits that could make corn-based ethanol to jet more likely to increase demand for corn-based ethanol going forward. So should we start thinking about, they're only in place until the end of 2027. Should we already start thinking about getting some sort of an conversation, at least start that conversation about an extension of that tax credit before it's even put in place? It just seems it seems kind of wild. And Senator Grassley was exactly right. It'll be easier to answer that question after the elections this fall, to see who will be making the decisions and which policies are going to be in place. But regardless, we need to start making plans and thinking forward to potentially putting some of those production practices in place to make yourself eligible for some of those tax credits. Kurt Alice is the head of sustainable business at Farmers Business Network, and he joins us right now. Kurt, it's great to talk with you. How are you?
Hey, Chip, doing really good.
Good.
How are you this morning?
Doing real fine, real fine. Glad that you were here. Okay, you heard that setup. The announcement that we got from the Treasury Department last week, I think it was just last week, maybe the week before. Anyway, the announcement that we got, what does it mean for farmers right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've been trying to unlock field level scoring for biofuels for a few years now. We started with the low carbon fuel standard in California, in 2021. We were trying to get some of these rewards unlocked. And now we're seeing the continued development. There's been some regional proposals for clean fuel markets, and now we're seeing this domestic policy, this federal level policy to get rewards. And so, what did we learn from 40B? Right, we learned that really requirements are being put in place for a future policy. Right, there's very limited sustainable aviation fuel being produced right now. Right, and so to say here's how farmers get rewarded for that, it's a really limited market of farmers that could get rewarded there. Right, and then simultaneously we're seeing that the USDA has taken control of more of how 45Z will be implemented, and 45Z is potentially now, right? It's the corn and soybeans that are going into renewable fuel today, and so that's the one. I think we could talk a lot about 40B and what we've learned from it and what the implications are, but I think we're going to see different rules from 45Z. But then it leads to the question that you're bringing up, which is, if we're thinking about that, should we be thinking about an extension for 45Z? Because will we even have time to monetize that? And so then you say, okay, well then should farmers be, starting to think about these practices today that are outlined in 40B that we have pretty high confidence will be included in 45Z? And I guess my response to that is, and every farm business, as you guys know, is going to be completely different. But what I've seen in the last 4 years in these markets, since I've been working on sustainability at Farmers Business Network, is that there continues to be more demand for these practices. Right. And so if you feel like these practices are interesting for your operation, that there's co-benefits and things that are good for your farm, whether it be long-term soil health or protection against erosion, or it's going to be different by geography, then maybe get started. But there's so much unknown with 45Z right now that I wouldn't recommend a farmer to make a lot of investment, a lot of operational change, just in anticipation before we have the rules.
Yeah, if you're going to make these changes that would make your grain qualified, eligible for the 45Z tax credits, or the ethanol produced from your grain to be eligible for the 45Z tax credits, there better be other reasons, is what it feels like, Kurt. Like, as you are explaining, you better be able to justify it with other benefits, because as I think about it, and I think this is right, but the 40B credits that are available right now, that might be eligible on some 22 crop that's out there, on 23 crop that's out there, but obviously 24 crop, if you could market it before the end of the year and everything qualifies, then it would be eligible for 40B credits. But most of what we're talking about is biofuel production in 2020, after 2025, January 1, 2025, under the 45Z, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I guess I kind of think about it in terms of crop year, right? And when the practices actually go in place, right? And so one of the ways in which you can get rewards is cover cropping, right?
Yeah.
And if you want the cover crops to be attributed to the crop year 25 season, right? Stuff, for corn and beans, things that will be harvested in fall 25. Like you gotta be planting cover crops fall of 2024, right? In order to impact that. And so will we have clarity on 45Z at that point? Can we set farmers up for success to be able to know how they can, bring to bear these rewards with decisions that they're making this year? So far, I mean, we've been pretty delayed in terms of the guidance, right?
Yeah.
And so
what are the odds that we're going to get it on time? I mean, next to zero.
There is pressure, with the election coming up, to get some rules in place. I do appreciate that the USDA is kind of stepping in here and thinking about, hopefully what practical implementation of the rewards would look like. And we're in our partnerships with Archer Daniels Midland and Poet. We're preparing for this because we want to be able to use these rewards and bring more farmers into programs. But it's a waiting game.
Yeah, it certainly is. So do you think part of the other issue is the documentation of the grain down the line, is preserving the identity once you deliver the grain to an elevator or to an ethanol facility? Is the identity all preserved? Do you think that these rules lighten up under 45Z, or do you think that checking all three boxes on those production practices, the no-till, the cover crop, and the efficient fertilizer, do you think they're going to have to continue to check all three boxes to make their grain eligible?
Yeah, no one has the crystal ball here on this, right? And so I don't want to speak out of school, but I would be surprised if the USDA also had the bundling requirement in there, because again, just think about 40B. It's a future. It's a policy that's going to impact a lot of acres in the future, not today. 45Z is going to impact today, right? So when you're making rules for 40B, maybe you can be a little bit more restrictive, a little bit more prescriptive in terms of what actually activates the reward, right? But for 45Z, you look at the climate smart grants, you look at the USDA's historic goals of having public-private partnerships that help to accomplish their NRCS goals with CSP and EQIP, et cetera, right? There's a long-standing pattern of overlap between, private goals and public goals when it comes to conservation. And so I would hope that there wouldn't be that what we've been calling kind of a bundling requirement where you have to do all three, and that there would be rewards for each. Well, that would be the practical implementation that I would see.
Kurt, it almost feels like if they just go with the bundling as they have done under 40B, that it throws the idea or the concept of a carbon intensity score out the window, because if you do all three, you're eligible. Carbon intensity 0, whatever. But instead, it doesn't allow for some practices to be implemented on some farms, other practices on other farms, commingle the grain. The cumulative carbon intensity score of the ethanol coming out of that plant is X. Therefore, it is or isn't eligible going forward.
It's a great call out, and what it makes me think of is really what we need here in order to impact the facility level score is a lot of acres of participation. Right? If you only have 30% of farmers eligible to have even their scores considered, right? Or practices considered, then you're not going to be able to achieve the benefits and the reduction.
Exactly. Kurt, we've got to go. We need to talk about this again some other time. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You bet. Kurt Allis, head of sustainable business at FBN.
Knowledge is power. We're here to charge your batteries. AgriTalk.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm your host, Chip Flory. Glad that you're with us on this Monday morning. Joining us now, Allison Walston. She is the Senior Product Development Manager for Insecticides at Valent. Allison, welcome to AgriTalk.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Glad that you are here to be part of this year's Be Sure campaign on AgriTalk. Tell us about this year's campaign and what you're hoping people learn.
Okay, well, a little bit about the Be Sure campaign is
Mm-hmm.
it's a public service announcement type of campaign, and we're promoting best management practices, especially when using neonicotinoids on farms, urban landscapes, orchards, everything like that. And so this was launched back in 2019. So this makes it our 6th year for the campaign. It's organized by Growing Matters and a group of stakeholders in the agricultural industry. And
Right.
so the 2024 goal is to emphasize the importance of reading a pesticide label, specifically an insecticide label, when using insecticides, because the label is the law and it
Mm-hmm.
has all the information that you would ever need. You just have to know where to find it within the label.
Right. Right. Okay. All that information that's on there. What kind of information are we talking about? What can be found on the label?
Well, one of the first parts is how to protect yourself. And so there's a whole section called Personal Protective Equipment, PPE, and that tells you what you need to do and what you need to wear for mixing, loading, and applying the insecticide. You can also find important information about pollinators, specifically honeybees. There's usually honeybee icons, little pictures of it in a red box, and everything is all of the important information is located within there about when to apply, what to avoid if you need to move the pollinator boxes. Then how to properly store the material, disposal, drift management to make sure you're not making too many small of driplets, droplets, and that because those can carry over to the beehives and things like that. So those are some of the important things about pollinators.
Yeah, exactly. Talking about how to apply the crop protection out there, but to do it in a way that's mindful to safety for yourself and safety for all the pollinators and everything. What can applicators do to protect those pollinators and to protect themselves? There's a lot of information on the label, but as you're getting out there and getting on the ground and getting to work, Allison, what do you want? What do you want those applicators to have in mind?
Well, the first thing is to make sure about the insecticide. Can you use it at bloom at all, or anytime the pollinators are foraging or out flying around? So that's the first thing. Can you use it at that specific timing? If not, then don't use it. Follow that label. If you can use it during bloom, you want to make sure that you don't directly spray the bee boxes or the bees directly. And a lot of times the label will tell you what time of day to spray or give you that type of information. Don't spray when bees are actively foraging or the blossoms are open or things like that. You might want to spray at night or early in the morning before the bees get super active.
Gotcha. They're out there doing a job. Respect them while they're doing their job, right?
Exactly. They're busy bees.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So, Allison, when the goal here of the Be Sure campaign of Growing Matters is to protect that pollinator population. And it really comes down to following what's on the label, respecting what's on the label, and being good stewards of the environment and the wildlife around you, right?
Exactly. We live in this community, we grow in this community, and we need food just as much as our neighbors. And so we want to keep the pollinators safe because that's where a lot of our food comes from. I'm out in Washington State, and so our apples, pears, cherries, those are all bee pollinated. And in order to have an apple, you have to keep the bee safe.
Yeah. I think about some of the crop protection that takes place here in the Midwest and livestock producers with that hay crop. We get out and we get to the clover before it gets too heavily bloomed. But as soon as it starts to bloom, those pollinators are out there and working in that clover. So it's something that we need to keep in mind. Allison, where can we go for more information?
Well, there's a lot of resources you can go to. One of primary ones is growingmatters.org/be sure. If you want specific label information, you can go to that company's website that manufactures that label. There's also other label resources. Each state Department of Ag will have a label resource where you can check, and you always want to continuously check labels. Don't save it on your hard drive and then look it up another day. Labels are constantly changing, so always go to that type of website to make sure you've got the most recent and up-to-date label.
That's great advice right there, because you if you've used a product in the past, you still want to check that label every time you use it for updates, correct?
Exactly, because there's always new rules coming out of EPA, or a state makes a new thing, or the company might want to add a pest. And so, yes, always check online for the newest label available.
Yeah, you don't want to get into a situation where you find yourself saying, well, the last time I used this product. Make sure that you're up to speed on everything that is on that label, and keeping track of what is important. Allison, good stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, that is Allison Walston, the Senior Product Development Manager for Insecticides at Valent. Good message there, Davis.
Yeah.
To make sure that we're following the label and doing what we can to watch out for those pollinators as they work out there.
Hear, hear. Yep.
All right. Hey, thank you so much for listening. Thanks to Senator Grassley for making time for us again this morning. We certainly appreciate that. Come back this afternoon. We're going to have a conversation with Brian Grady. Brian is, of course, the editor at Pro Farmer. We'll be talking markets tomorrow morning. Davis will be in with a Farmer Forum.